F1 2021 is a real test for human and machine. If you prefer the simpler machine, you've come to the right place. We'll take a look at the best settings for your controller to let you compete with all the high-end rigs in F1 2021. Compared to other racing titles like ACC for example, F1 2021 is actually one of the more controller-friendly games on the market. It isn't uncommon to see good lap times from handheld device drivers. To make this experience as pleasant as possible, only a few tweaks have to be applied. First off, you have to know your way around the settings menu. The options for your controller can be found under Controls, Vibration, and Force Feedback. The first basic thing you have to adjust is the ERS mode in the generic settings. If you choose Toggle, you will have to switch the overtake button on and off again as opposed to holding it, which only applies the ERS while you press the assigned button. Some players prefer to keep their hand on the button so they don't have to reposition their fingers, possibly causing a mistake.
Bruh.
Another way to avoid big mistakes is to watch our latest F1 tutorial with Dave Gaming, so you don't have to fear any upcoming challenges. After you've adjusted that to your preference, you can head back to the main screen and add a profile, which means you can customize your controls the way you want to. So let's take a look at that. Now we're at the bread and butter of controller customization. One thing up front. The standard button layout is very straightforward, and especially if you just started to pick up F1, it may be more beneficial to learn about in-game mechanics such as the MFD first before rebinding your controls. If you're used to controller settings from different games, however, this menu is the place where you can make the big adjustments. If you also want to enjoy awesome sim racing content in the future, you should consider hitting the bell and subscribing so you don't miss out. One basic change that is often done is to unbind the look forwards, back, left, and right options to use the right stick for something else. Many drivers don't actually take their eyes off the track even if there's something going on behind or besides them. This frees up the space for more important settings. You can assign MFD shortcuts to the right stick, for example. This menu is essentially your status report and provides the few things you actually adjust in the race, such as brake bias and differential. They are, however, tough to reach in the standard layouts without taking your hands off the steering, unless you have an extra hand available to you. When binding them to your right stick, you can easily make quick adjustments in the menu without making too much effort. Be careful, however, if you unbind the look around options, it is crucial to have the proximity arrows or the virtual mirror enabled in the on-screen display to have at least some kind of overview while on track. We've talked about some neat adjustments to the buttons, now let's talk about the steering calibration, which can be found in the same menu as before. We suggest starting with the steering saturation as it's the easiest to adjust. Open the test menu and simulate a full turn left and a full turn right. If the steering numbers at both ends don't match 100, you have to increase this option a bit. This is vital so you can access the full range of motion from your controller. The same thing goes for the steering dead zone. Open the test menu again and flick your joystick a bit. The value for steering should return to a neutral 0 if everything is set up correctly. A battle-scarred controller might have some wear on its joysticks though, which could cause it to be a little inaccurate. To fix this, you have to increase your steering dead zone. But why is that important? Well, this setting prevents your car from slightly turning to one side if you just go full force on a straight, for example. So if you don't want to end up zigzagging around, this can be instrumental for your controller usage. Something else that's also instrumental, especially on the feeling side, is the steering linearity. This option determines how much power you have to use in order to register your input. It could also be named steering sensitivity if you go by terms you would usually use for a mouse, and if you increase this setting, you get a lot more control, especially in the lower speed sections. The reason this works so well is because F1 historically suppresses the controller inputs a little bit to make it easier for beginners not to lose the car when starting from scratch. This can be a point of contention for you too. In particular, if you're used to F1 controls, this could feel a little overwhelming at first. If your setting is at 0 now, try how 25 feels, and gradually increase it if you still feel like you don't have enough control. The same way we adjusted the steering, we'll adjust the throttle and braking next. For the saturation and the dead zone, it's identical in principle. You open up the test menu and look for any unwanted values, but the linearity is a little bit different this time. For controllers, you generally wanted to have some level of ABS and traction control in the past games. At the start, you should still at least run medium traction control, but this year, you can try turning off all assists as you gain more experience. After turning off TC and ABS, you'll quickly see that it is quite difficult to apply only small amounts amounts of pressure with your trigger buttons on the controller. This can easily lead to lockups or spins at corner exits. That's why we recommend setting these linearities to 50 each. A higher value here just makes it that much easier to apply a controlled amount of force in your gas and brake modulation, as would otherwise only be possible with a pedal set. Our last tip is more a question of preference. It's about the vibration and force feedback. Some players like to keep a steady hand while driving. Especially in longer races, the constant hand massages your controller gives you when you have a high vibration setting can become irritating to some, but they do have a purpose. The vibration and force feedback strength options can display a relatively accurate feeling for some important situations if turned up to max. There'll be a distinct vibration in the right stick if you're in danger of a spin, and a rumbling in the left one if you lock up. These can be good indicators to help you get a feel for the car that you may miss simply relying on eyesight. The choice is yours, but it can help you. So we'd advise you try it out and pump the value all the way up to 150. Not everyone is forced to be a rig elitist nowadays. While the hardware products of Fanatec and Thrustmaster still provide a more realistic gaming feel, they are no longer a necessity. With some of our simple tips and tricks, you can turn your controller into a well-honed tool in F1 2021, and that will allow you to compete with the best of the best. For more esports racing content in general, visit overtake.gg or our YouTube and other social channels. On the right, there are some of our finest F1 2021 videos just for you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye-bye.